I just want to quickly introduce Gary. I guess most of you know Mr. or Professor Gary L. Francione. He's a professor for law at Rutgers University. He is probably one of the people that most would associate with the term abolitionism. He's well known throughout the animal rights protection movement for his criticism of animal welfare and regulation and the property status of non-human animals, and especially for his abolitionist theory. Today, Gary is going to give us a presentation which has a title, The Appropriation of Abolition and Animal Rights by Regulationists. He's going to basically talk about how regulationists are nowadays attempting to appropriate the term abolitionism or abolitionist in exactly the same way that they did with the animal rights term in the 1990s.
I just want to know briefly why you put Meatless Monday and welfarist movement in the same place when you're talking about against this.
Because I think that it's crazy to promote the idea that there's a moral distinction between flesh and other animal products. There isn't. You know, I frequently run into people who have been vegetarians for 20 years, and you know, until they get exposed to the abolitionist ideas, you know, then they go vegan, and they say no one's ever asked them. You know, I mean, they always thought vegetarianism was perfectly fine. We draw this artificial line between meat and other animal products. I don't. I mean, you know, you want to have meatless, you want to have a day. I mean, I started this thing last week actually called Vegan Monday, Vegan Every Day. You want to have a day. I mean, I don't like the idea of saying that our moral obligations to animals are on particular days and we don't have them other days. My view is that we ought to be basically, you know, we ought to get away from all this gimmickry. It's all gimmickry, and these are all things which are lend themselves very, very nicely to the campaigns of large animal organizations. I think they're gimmicks. I don't think they work. I don't think they're changing anything, and they're not changing fundamental thinking. So if you want to have a day, have a Vegan Monday, but always make clear that it's vegan every day, that you're not saying that they should not be vegan on Tuesday. I think the whole Meatless Monday thing, promoting this incoherent distinction between flesh and other animal products, just doesn't make any sense. By the way, you know, if you eat primarily beef and pork, you stop eating the beef and pork and you start eating more eggs, you may actually be responsible for more deaths, because there are more deaths per 1,000 calories of eggs than there is of cows and pigs. So this idea that, well, we stop eating flesh and we eat eggs instead for our animal protein, you may be responsible for killing more animals. I don't think I don't think that we ought to look at it in terms of numbers. I just think in terms of this idea about vegetarianism being a coherent moral position. I don't think it is. Hello, hi, what's your name?
Hi, Gary. This is George, from Brazil. And I would...
George from Brazil.
That's me,
The George that I met in June.
The George, yeah, the one you talked to 2 months ago.
How are you?
How's it going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very well.
So my question is, you have, I never had the opportunity to ask you this, and you always talk about, you know, focusing all energy in the movement, and how good of a use we make of our energy, talking about the right issues, and not talking about single themes. But I would like to know, how do you see, as far as energy use, when we are making partnerships with other movements or other causes in order to use that, if you will, as a means to achieve our cause, but it's actually, as Patrice put very clearly today, they're intersectional, so we're actually bringing all causes to their objective. So is that an efficient use of energy, or do you see that as a deviation from our cause when we are building bridges with other movements, and perhaps in that instance using arguments that are not straightly focused on an animal rights issue, apparently?
I'm not saying that animal people ought to stop promoting veganism or stop focusing on animals, and they ought to focus. I'm saying that we, in our promotion of abolition or animal rights, we ought not to be using sexist imagery. We ought not to be using races. You know, I mean, I get very upset when I see this stupidity about, acting as though the Chinese are morally iniquitous because they eat dogs. I mean, nobody should be eating any animals, but the Chinese are no worse than anybody else, or the Romanians. Now the bad group du jour are the Romanians. They're bad. They're bad because they're killing dogs. Well, I got news for you. We kill 3.5 million of them here. So, the Romanians are bad. The Chinese are bad. I don't believe in that. I think it's nonsense. But what I try to do when I talk to people from other social movements, because I do that quite a bit. So I'll talk to a feminist group or to a gay rights group, and I always tell them, look, keep fighting for gay rights, keep fighting for women's rights, but you got to eat 3 times a day. You got to go buy clothes. You got to go buy shampoo. So when you eat vegan. When you buy clothes, don't buy leather, wool, fur. I don't draw a distinction. I think the anti-fur campaign. Look, I've been in this for 32 years. I've been a vegan for 32 years, and I've been doing this work for 32 years. And when I first got involved, the big issue was the anti-fur campaign. I never understood why fur was any different from wool or leather. And I stopped when I became a vegan, I stopped wearing all of them. And I've come to the conclusion that the only difference between fur and leather is if you walk up to somebody who wearing a leather coat and say some of the things that I have heard animal people say to women wearing fur, the person wearing the leather coat who may be a male may remove your teeth. And that's basically the primary distinction. But I do not see a distinction between, wool is horrible too. So my view is I always say to people, look, fight for women's rights, keep on fighting for children's rights or whatever it is you want to fight for. Fight the good, fight something, oppose injustice. But while you do it, be vegan. Don't buy animal clothing. I'm not interested in all animal people becoming, spending their time in the gay rights movement, or gay rights people becoming animal people. I'm interested in all of us seeing that all of this discrimination, racism, sexism, heterosexism, speciesism, ableism, classism, all this stuff is a form of violence. I am opposed to violence. I think we have to reject it all, and we have to be clear about that. And so I'm not suggesting that anybody ought to stop doing their animal stuff and start doing something else, or that people who are doing children's rights issues. I had somebody call me up the other day and say, I'm doing children's rights work. How can I help animals more? I said, are you vegan? And she said, no. I said, go vegan. I said, that's the first thing you can do. And I said, she said, should I start getting involved? And I said, there's really very little to get involved with in terms of these large organizations. Most of their campaigns are useless and counterproductive. The best thing to do is go vegan, and in your context, in your children's rights context, where you're talking to people who are interested about children's rights, why don't you try to explain to them about the relationship between animal rights and human rights, and why, if they care about children, they ought to care about non-humans, and why nobody would be campaigning for more gentle child abuse, why we shouldn't be focused on happy exploitation, and why veganism is the analog in the animal context of what the abolition of child abuse and pedophilia is in the children's context. So I'm not suggesting that we ought to sort of all become, activists and everything. I just think we've got to be clear in terms of what our values are, in terms of whatever thing we're doing.